Hello everybody, we're going to be talking about trigonometry, specifically about radians and degree measure and some of the basic terminology that goes along with all of it. So before we even start anything, let's take a moment and think about the question, what is an angle? Just take a moment for yourself, write down a definition. So go ahead and hit pause and we'll hang on for a minute. Okay, so did you think about what we had here? Well, an angle. What does an angle actually measure? An angle, like many things in life, we have a lot of different types of measures in the world. We think about measures of distance, and if we think about distance, we might typically think about something like inches or something like that. But distance measures a distance along a straight line from point to point, right? So if we have a straight line, we call that measured distance, right? But an angle isn't distance. An angle isn't a distance between these two, right? Because then we would just might say inches or centimeters or millimeters or some other thing like that. No, an angle measures something different. Now, of course, other measures in the world are things like weight, in which we measure mass, right? And mass could be measured in pounds or in grams or something like that. Distance measures in inches or centimeters or something like that. But what the angle actually measures is the amount of rotation. So if you imagine that we take a line, we're going to call it a ray, right? This is from geometry. We take a ray, which is part of a line. We start at a point and we go off towards positive infinity. And then we take another ray, and starting at that same point, we rotate around. So that amount of rotation is what we're really after when we talk about an angle, the amount of a rotation, right, between two rays. So we need a little bit of terminology to make sure that we understand what's going on right here. So this point that the two rays rotate about is called the vertex. The initial ray where we start measuring, that's our initial side, and then of course we have our side where we stop measuring. We call that our terminal side. All right, so initial side, terminal side, these are important topics to us, even though it seems sort of, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference because, I mean, if I measure a 30-degree angle, most people are usually angle to measures in degrees. If I said I had a 30-degree angle, it wouldn't matter if I measured it, my initial side here, my terminal side here, if I put it somewhere else in the plane, and I said this was 30 degrees, right? 30 degrees is 30 degrees is 30 degrees, is it not? Well, yes and no. It depends on how we frame the question. One of the things that trigonometry does better than pretty much anything else is that it combines this aspect of geometry, where we talk about angles, the amounts of rotation, and that kind of thing, and we marry it to an x and y axis system. So analytical geometry is what we call that. When we were graphing functions in algebra, we would have an analytical geometric representation called a graph of that function. E to the x, natural log of x, those also count. But what do we do here? Well, in our trigonometric setup, we're going to set it up in a very specific way. Our vertex will always be placed at the origin. So any measure that you take, any angle that you measure, is measured with its vertex at the origin. Always, 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 right? We never measure it anywhere else. And the initial side is always measured along the positive x-axis. We're going to call that a standard position. It's our frame of reference. It's a way of comparing angles in such a way that when we look at them, we can add some different kinds of analysis that we wouldn't be able to do just from the geometry. So my 30-degree angle is very specific in a very specific place here in the x and y plane.